Good morning, I'm Taylor Wilson, and today is Friday, March 21st, 2025. This is the Excerpt. Today, as expected, Trump ordered his administration to dismantle the education department, plus what might be on the way in an expected travel ban, and we take a look at the challenges for cash-poor Americans. President Donald Trump ordered his administration yesterday to dismantle the Department of Education, looking to achieve a top campaign promise, even though the White House acknowledged the agency can't and won't entirely be dissolved. Trump signed the long-anticipated executive order at a ceremony in the White House's East Room, attended by several Republican governors and state education commissioners, along with students seated at school desks. Trump directed his Education Secretary Linda McMahon to take all necessary steps to facilitate the closure of the department and return education authority to the states, according to a White House summary of the order. But the order's immediate impact is unclear, since only Congress can eliminate a federal agency, and the federal government does not set school curriculum. That's long been up to states and local school districts. You can read more on usatoday.com and check out our special deep dive episode on what's next for education with education reporter Zach Shermley. We have a link in today's show notes. President Donald Trump is expected to ban or severely restrict travel to the United States by citizens of more than a dozen countries as soon as today. I caught up with USA Today White House correspondent Francesca Chambers for more. Hello, Francesca. Thanks for hopping on.
Hey, Taylor. Thanks for having me.
So, Francesca, what do we know about this travel ban as of now?
So the president on the campaign trail said that he would reinstate the travel ban that he put in place during his first administration. On his first day in office in January, the president signed an executive order telling his administration to put together a new set of recommendations, as well as a list of countries that could have travel banned to the United States or partially suspended. But the Trump administration appears to be looking at doing things differently this time. Two separate memos that were leaked to reporters show that the list was much more expansive and could be up to 43 countries this time around, as they look at other potential measures and add visa restrictions on top of that outright ban for some countries.
So I know courts initially blocked his travel ban last time around before the Supreme Court then upheld a later version, Francesca. What's the expectation this time around in terms of maybe how this one differs from Trump 1.0?
So, Taylor, this executive order explicitly says that the administration should identify countries throughout the world for which vetting and screening information is so deficient as to warrant a partial or full suspension of the admission of nationals from those countries. Now, that is where the administration could draw on a larger list of countries than it did the first time. Individuals, Taylor, who worked on the earlier version of the travel ban so that they learned a few things from that experience, even though the courts eventually upheld it and they would do things differently. Now the administration appears to be looking at a 3-tiered list where there would be the group of red countries where travel would be totally banned to the United States, as well as an orange list in which travel would be restricted and visas would be restricted, and then a third tier, which essentially is the administration putting countries on notice if this goes into effect. Now, those countries could get off the list by providing the United States with the information it is seeking, or they could go up on the list because the administration deems them a national security threat.
So obviously a big question here is who's going to be on the list, but another question is when would this ban actually go into effect? Francesca, I know we've heard as soon as today, later today. What are you hearing, I guess, there on the ground?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily go into effect immediately. Even if the State Department, as well as the other departments that the president tasked with putting together this report, does submit its recommendations on Friday, the president wouldn't have to enact a travel ban immediately. Now, Taylor, I do want to stress that the versions that have been floating around were not finalized. It's not clear if the administration had completely approved of the list of countries that have been publicized. Those were made by staff, I was told by someone who worked on an earlier version of a travel ban, and they may not have even cleared the administration yet. So there could be countries that appeared on that list that might not be on the final one.
All right, lots to still keep an eye out for. Francesca Chambers covers the White House for USA Today. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you so much, Taylor.
A federal judge has said the Social Security Administration likely violated privacy laws by giving Elon Musk's aides unbridled access to millions of Americans' private data. U.S. District Judge Ellen Lipton Hollander of Maryland ordered a stop to any further record sharing and said that Musk's Department of Government Efficiency was intruding into the personal affairs of millions of Americans as part of its hunt for fraud and waste. A White House spokesperson criticized the decision in a statement and said Trump will continue to seek all legal remedies available to ensure the will of the American people goes into effect. It's often difficult for cash-poor Americans to get ahead. I spoke with USA Today money and personal finance reporter Medora Lee for a look at some of the factors at play. Hello, Medora.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Thanks for hopping on today, Medora. So just starting here, I want to ask you just kind of point blank, we're talking about cash poor Americans. How many Americans are cash poor, Medora? Do we have numbers there? And what does it mean really to be cash poor?
So, cash poor means that you don't have enough liquid cash on hand to cover any sort of emergency expenses, like if your car breaks down or you have to get to the doctor and things like that. These are people who are living paycheck to paycheck, basically. And there are more of these Americans than you would even realize. A lot of people think that that's, something that's limited to the working class, but really a lot of middle class Americans now are falling into this category, including people with college degrees who own homes, people who invest money, even people who have six-figure incomes. And most of them are women. More than half of them are women. Two-thirds generally tend to be millennials or Gen X, and 14% are generally Black. So there are a lot of people who fall into this category that you may not even realize.
You outline bad financial products in this story, Medora. Can you just help us understand what those are and how they fit into this conversation?
When most people, when they're down and out, they don't expect someone to like kick them in the knees again, right? But that's basically what happens when your back is to the wall for a lot of these people. They will need to borrow some short-term money, and they'll discover that these bad financial products, that these companies that are willing to give them that loan really are going to charge them a lot of money. And so there was a study done by Solo. They did what they called a cash poor report. And they said because of people who had to take out these types of loans, Americans paid more than $39 billion in fees to borrow money to help pay for these unexpected expenses last year. And those fees were on top of the advertised APRs, which were already really high. I mean, when you think about high credit card rates, you're thinking like in that 20% and higher range. Like some of these would maybe even get into the 600% range. So that's a lot of money.
So, Medora, for the folks you spoke with, I mean, what's been their experience with some of these quote unquote bad financial products?
It's kind of interesting. So, for example, one woman I spoke to in Mesa, Arizona, I mean, she's kind of like that middle class American. She had everything going for her. She graduated with a degree in advertising and public relations with honors. She worked 20 years as a healthcare executive, earning as much as a six-figure salary for half of that time. And she, like a lot of people do, she hits a rough patch. She had 3 years where she changed careers. She had a flooding of her home and property that she had to pay for. She got into a legal battle and she had a falling out with some family members. And during those 3 years, just 3 years of her whole life, she's 44, things were rough and she ended up having to deplete her savings. And as she said, she had an 806 credit score, which is pretty high, and nearly $150,000 saved before this all happened. And she went through every penny of it. She ended up having her cars repossessed and she lost her home to foreclosure. She became homeless for about 5 years. So during those 5 years, she ran into all sorts of crazy things. When her pickup truck broke down, she said that was her first introduction to bad financial products. She said she didn't want to be stuck somewhere. So she called someplace and they were willing to pay her $2,200 bill to get her truck fixed, but she had to pay it back full within 3 months or else the interest would go to, and then here we go, from 0% to 169%. They needed the back 3 months of interest due immediately. And so she felt she had no choice, because would you want to be stuck out in nowhere? So she did it. Things like that keep setting these people back. because they can never catch up, because they can't ever dig themselves out of the hole. Another single mom in Connecticut, she's always had a full-time job her whole life, at least a full-time job, if not more jobs. And she, because of the way the paycheck structure is, it's very rigid. You get paid every 2 weeks or once a month. Her bills would come due and she wouldn't have enough money to cover it. And then she would end up having to pay all these late fees and then interest on top of it. And the late fees alone, are sometimes $50 each. And so she said that ended up eating up a lot of her money. So she couldn't really catch up just because of that. A lot of people, they're not necessarily poor and they're not spending their money unwisely, but it's just kind of the way things go. She tried shuffling credit cards and going through the credit card cycle, but that didn't really work. She considered payday loans, but those are outrageous interest rates and really hard to pay back. So people get stuck.
Yeah, I mean, you can see how just a little bit of bad luck can really spiral out of control. Medora Lee covers money and personal finance for USA Today. Listeners can find this full piece with a link in today's show notes. Medora, I think folks will really appreciate the spotlight you're bringing to this issue. Thanks for hopping on.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to The Excerpt. We're produced by Shannon Ray Green and Kelly Monahan, and our executive producer is Laura Beatty. You can get the podcast wherever you get your audio, and if you're on a smart speaker, just ask for The Excerpt. I'm Taylor Wilson, and I'll be back tomorrow with more of The Excerpt from USA Today.